And Tom, the floor is all yours. The club is all yours.
All right, everyone, make sure your hair looks good because we're recording. And in addition to topics for meetings, I'm always recruiting for the newsletter. So if you want to type up a small blurb, a paragraph or a few paragraphs about your favorite herp, your favorite herping adventure that you've been on, anything herp related, we do our electronic newsletter. I try to get it out bi-monthly, and we email that out to our membership. So feel free to email me any submissions, photos as well. You're in the field, you want to submit a photo for the newsletter or a photo of yourself with your favorite herp, pet, absolutely. So the Herp Club with the Natural History Society has been around as long as the society has. In most recent days, we have gained, well, in the past few months, we've gained a large number of folks, new members, which is great. The best thing about this group is the diversity of talent. So we have folks that are interested in field herpetology. We have folks that are interested in the captive husbandry of reptiles and amphibians. We're all interested in reptile and amphibian conservation worldwide. And it's everything from PhDs to 5-year-olds with their first leopard gecko. And when we are able to meet in person, we do, and everybody has a great time and shares knowledge and shares passion about reptiles and amphibians. And that's our main goal, is to spread that passion, spread that knowledge as far and as wide as we can to encourage understanding of these misunderstood animals and encourage their conservation. And next month's talk is a great example of that. The amphibian populations worldwide are under threat, not only from habitat loss, but through this chytrid fungus that is wiping out populations and causing extinctions in Central and South America, as well as in Europe. But tonight, we're going to talk about some positive amphibian things, which is the vernal pools. This time of year is an exciting time if you're a herpetologist, because we've been hibernating all winter, and we're finally able to wake up and stretch our slimy little limbs and look forward to getting back out into the field. And we know it's time to do that because we start hearing wood frogs call, we start hearing spring peepers call. Amphibians, a lot of reptiles and amphibians, but our local amphibians in particular are very cyclical in their life cycle. And the ones we're going to see briefly tonight are very much so, in that you only see them a few weeks out of the entire year. Things like wood frogs and spotted salamanders come out for a few weeks to a month or two above ground. They breed in these massive breeding explosions, and then they go away and you don't see them the rest of the year. So not only is it a fascinating biological event, but it's a chance to see these animals that you may not see unless you just get lucky and happen upon them digging around in the forest later on in the year. I am going to attempt my screen sharing now because I practiced it earlier and I think I'm almost a novice. And y'all gonna have to let me know if you see this, because I can't see you anymore. Bronwyn, how's it look? Can you see that?
It's good, Tom.
All right, great, thank you. Okay, now if I can advance slides. All right, so all the photos for the presentation tonight, and if there's ever a large period of silence, pipe up and let me know that I've dropped off, because I won't know. All the photos for this, it's a short, I promise it's a very short presentation, were taken from our Facebook page, our club Facebook page. So I will give credit where credit is due for the photos tonight. This photo was taken yesterday. Hugh Simmons, who is up at the Phoenix Wildlife Center in Phoenix, Maryland, their pond was inundated with wood frogs. So this time of year, one of the first amphibians to make march towards the vernal pool is the wood frog. These frogs live in the woodlands the rest of the year, and they're a frog that has the most northern range. You can find them all the way up into Canada. They're able to freeze solid in the wintertime, and they thaw out and wake up and have these explosive breeding events every spring. Now, vernal pools are unique and fragile and important because they are temporary bodies of water. They fill up with spring rain. They provide a breeding ground for several species of amphibians, and then they dry up later in the year. And now that's very important for several of the species we're going to see, because these animals rely on reproducing in fish-free water. So since these ponds dry up every year, they don't have fish populations that are going to prey on the eggs and young, the larvae of these amphibians. There's certainly other predators, but fish are not one of them. That's a male wood frog there. The males are slightly smaller than the females, and the females tend to be a little bit more reddish brown in color. And I'm going to attempt to play a call for you of the wood frog, if it works. Stand by. So that's an individual frog. And it sounds kind of like a chuckle or a quack. But then if you multiply that by several thousand frogs, it can be a real total cacophony of noise. Now they vocalize, frogs vocalize to say, hey, here I am, I'm a boy frog. Any of you lady frogs, come on over to my side of the pond and let's lay some eggs. Wood frogs lay eggs in these massive mats that tend to float on the surface, and there'll be thousands and thousands of eggs in these great big mats in the vernal pools. And it's a great survival strategy, because if you clump all your eggs together, the chance of any one egg surviving is increased. So the eggs in the center of that mass have more of a chance of survival. Those outer eggs will get eaten by things like newts, diving beetles, some birds, water snake, garter snakes love eating frog eggs. But you'll see these big massive, some of them are just 4 or 5 feet across, and it's really impressive to see. Bringing up the close rear after the wood frogs are these gorgeous little tree frogs, the spring peepers, which people are very familiar with. They are really the sound of spring that most people hear. They are tree frogs. They have little toe pads that allow them to climb up surfaces. You see that one there is on some glass. And this photo was taken last year at our vernal pool hike. We collect some of the frogs and put them in little containers on tables next to the pond so folks can see them and take photos up close. But they're very tiny little frogs. That's full size. That's a full grown frog. That's one of our members' fingers. That's Brittany Rogers' finger. That was one of her photos, I believe. On the back of this frog, you can see a dark X. And they're a species named crucifer. That's where that comes from. That's how you can key out a spring peeper. They have these little brown X's on their back, and that's full grown for our little spring peepers. They'll call at the ponds, at the base of reeds and twigs and grass, and you'll hear thousands and thousands of them calling, but to try to find just one individual calling is very difficult sometimes. And it's kind of a fun challenge. And when the kids that come out on the field trips love trying to spot these little frogs. One of the great migrations to witness is that of the spotted salamander. So this again was taken at last year's hike, which we will be advertising fairly soon. That's spotted salamander, Imbistoma maculatum. They are impressive salamanders if you've never seen one in real life. They get up to 7 inches long. They're big, robust salamanders, glossy black with these enamel yellow spots. No two are alike. They all have unique spot patterns on them. And they breed in these temporary ponds and pools. This one here is seen underneath an egg mass of a wood frog. So there's a wood frog egg mass there, and that's the spotted salamander next to it. Here's a better look at the spotted salamander. That's a photo by Russ, who's online with us tonight. Just absolutely gorgeous salamanders. They're part of the mole salamander family, and true to that name, they spend most of their life underground in tunnels made by rotten tree roots, small mammal burrows. Occasionally, you'll find them under rocks and logs in the forest the rest of the year. But usually the only time you're going to see these animals is a few weeks in the springtime during these heavy spring rain rain events when they migrate to these vernal pools to breed. The spotted salamanders have internal fertilization. The male will drop a small packet of sperm on the floor or on a branch underwater, and they try to court the female over to pick up the sperm packet. And female spotted salamanders will pick up multiple sperm packets, and then several days later will lay 2 to 4 egg masses, which may have 2 to 50 eggs in each mass. These spotted salamander egg masses will actually have algae that grows in them that will benefit the larvae that are developing. The algae produces oxygen for the larvae, and the CO2 that they're producing feeds the algae as well. So it's a really unique little symbiotic relationship that they have. This was kind of a neat photo taken last year of all the creepy eye shine. Believe it or not, frogs' eyes shine back when you shine them with a light. And there was hundreds in this pond that night. And these particular eyes belong to this species, the good old American toad. We have Fowler toads and American toads in our range here. And they tend to bring up, they're one of the last ones to come to the temporary ponds, but they tend to show up whenever. We'll have males show up very, very early when there's still snow on the ground. But most of the time, the bulk of the toads are breeding in May and June. But it's not unusual to see them at the vernal pools this time of year. Just thinking the early toad gets the girl, I guess. I never get tired of finding toads. They're extremely common, but they're always wonderful to find. I got a call here for the American toad. If it'll boot up, give me 1 minute here. So that's a peeper. That's the toad. So it's a very loud trilling call for the toads. And again, when there's hundreds of them in a pond, it's very loud. That's a toad egg mass. Toads lay their eggs in strings rather than clumps. So that's a telltale sign that it's a toad egg mass, not a frog. These eggs are kind of covered with silt, but if you see that on the bottom of a pond or at the edges, that's what they look like. When it's clear, you can see the individual black eggs in that jelly tube, but a lot of times they just get covered up with silt. It doesn't affect them at all. They'll still develop. Also, pickerel frogs can be found at these vernal pools, breeding as well. Not at the site we go to, not as many as the other species, but you will certainly find them there. So here's a shot from last year. It was just dumping rain at this moment. It was probably about 45 degrees, and everybody was having a ball. We set up a table next to the vernal pool so folks can observe up close, take photos, and get hands-on with some of the amphibian species. I can't stress enough how important this is. We have a lot of kids on these trips that are in the woods at night, getting rained on and hearing these amazing noises. And these are events that these children will never forget. And it's so important to expose not only ourselves, but the younger generation to these amazing biological events, because why else would they care about them? Nobody would know that this stuff goes on if we don't share that knowledge. During the day, it just looks like just a flooded chunk of forest. And at night, it comes alive with all these species that absolutely rely on this pond for their survival. So one of my big missions is getting as many kids in the woods as possible and getting them dirty and getting them wet and letting them hold a frog, because that's an invaluable experience. So I hope as many people as possible can join us on these vernal pool hikes. We do these hikes under permit through the Department of Natural Resources, because you can't go into state parks at night without a permit. And our permits are just about, I think, done. And we will be advertising dates for the vernal pool hikes soon. They will be limited attendance, firstly, because of COVID. Secondly, because they are fragile environments. We don't want a whole bunch of people trudging through the area at any one time. And when we're at the ponds, there's only a certain a couple of us that will go into the ponds to grab a specimen or two to show everybody. And we can't have masses of people walking through the water, because again, if you think about how these amphibians breed, they're very fragile sperm packets are on the ground, their eggs are in there, and we don't want to you can destroy the whole breeding population by walking through the pond too much. You stir up silt, you trample spermatophores. So we try to be cognizant of that, and we can certainly balance our education mission and still preserve the delicate nature of these ponds. But if you haven't been there, if you haven't done it, if you haven't seen these animals in their habitat, certainly please join us, join up. It's a great evening. It's easy to get to. The pond we go to is fairly close to the road, so there's not a lot of hiking involved. And we do have protocols for people leaving to spray down their boots or nets or anything that goes in the water when they leave, because we do not want to risk transmission of any pathogens from one pond or one habitat to another, should you be going somewhere else that weekend and walking in the water. But we have volunteers that cover all that. And it's a great time. So yeah, this is a magical time of year. These temporary pools and ponds can be found all over the state, and the breeding of these amphibians is just time to weather. So in December in Georgia, the spotted salamanders, wood frogs are breeding. And then January and February, the wave kind of reaches the mid-Atlantic, and then northern New York State, they don't get their breeding amphibian populations until April. So it kind of moves in this wave northward, depending on the temperature and the rainfall. And that's really what wakes them up. Snow melt will wake them up, but those warm spring rains are really what brings these amphibians out. Barometric pressure is a big one too. When there's a big change in barometric pressure, these animals know it and they come out. You got to wonder, when they're deep underground, how do they know what's going on the surface? Well, they got little drops of water falling on their head and they can feel that barometric pressure. So this here, if you can see them, I'm going to try not to destroy my computer with salamander droplets. Let's see, I got a towel here. Okay, that's a spotted salamander. So this is an adult spotted salamander. Absolutely beautiful. Look at that face. He's saying hello, Herp Club.
If you put it in speaker view, you can get a real nice view of that salamander if you go from gallery to speaker view.
And what I love about these salamanders, and this one's got some growing to do as well, but the spots on their back are, again, like a fingerprint. So you can ID individual salamanders based on their spots. Like a leopard, they don't change their spots. Well, they're all unique. So you can ID them by their little patterns. These are big, robust salamanders. This guy's got, again, some growing to do. He's putting his food into putting length instead of weight. And when they reach their maximum length of about 6.5, 7 inches, they'll start chunking up. Ambystoma is basically Latin for cup mouth, and they will engulf any little creature that they can. Earthworms, slugs, they'll eat other small salamanders if they can. But this time of year, their thoughts are on breeding and not so much eating. So I figured that was an appropriate show and tell given the topic. Our little educational spotted salamander here. Put him back in. And we have our other mole salamanders in the state. We have marble salamanders, which are, if you go on our Facebook page, Russ has some wonderful pictures of marble salamanders. And we have tiger salamanders, which are endangered in the state, and they are the largest land salamander in the United States. Very big, robust salamanders. They're restricted to the eastern shore of Maryland, the coastal plain area in Delaware. There's only a few ponds that they're breeding in, and they're protected in the state of Maryland. So that's our quick little brief on vernal pools. We certainly get a lot more in depth the night of when we're out at the ponds. Myself, Nick Spiro helps. We have several volunteers that are there to guide folks and help them get photos and answer all the questions they may have. I can't stress. Yep.
We have a couple of questions in the chat box. Can I put them to you?
Sure. Yeah, because I can't see them all, but yeah.
I'll tell them to you. Well, Kathy was interested in the vernal pools on private property. How is it best to care for them? She has one that's been all natural for 30 years, no invasive species, but it has started to fill in a little bit. So is there anything that it can do? And then in that same sense, can you build an artificial vernal pool, since vernal pools are decreasing in number throughout the state because it's a wetland area that's only wet for part of the year, and I know that it can sometimes get destroyed and developed.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So by their nature, vernal pools want to fill in. It's just what happens most of the time. Except in the so along the edges of the Gunpowder River system, which is a big state park system, pretty much on the sides of the Gunpowder, the length of it, there are vernal pools. A lot of it is overflow, but it's just that's a great spot to see them, and they tend to stay because whenever there's a flooding event. 2 years ago, we couldn't do any vernal pool hikes because there was a flooding event. The Gunpowder crested, went and flushed everything out of that vernal pond. So the eggs, the salamanders, whatever was in there was flushed downriver. And so what happens in those years? Well, you lose an entire generation. That's what happens. It's not unusual that every few years that entire breeding the eggs, the larvae, it all goes away, which is why it's important to conserve adult animals. These animals breed and have thousands and thousands of offspring because only 1 or 2 are going to survive to adulthood. So if you have a vernal pool on private property, you can certainly maintain it by kind of, lack of a better term, dredging it out in the dry season, just kind of digging it out. The only caution I would say is if you do have marble salamanders in your area, marble salamanders actually breed in the fall when the pond is dry, and they'll lay their eggs along the edge of the pond. And so when the winter rains start to fill the pond, the marble salamander eggs hatch first. So by the time the spotted salamanders show up, the marble larvae are already large and doing their thing, and they can prey on the spotted salamanders. But not every area has marbles. So digging it out, particularly in the center of the ponds, would help just maintain it. Also kind of controlling tree growth, so the trees aren't moving in, controlling an open canopy helps some species. And obviously just the never-ending battle against multiflora rose and other invasive plants like that, that tend to just suck the water out of an area and dry it out. Um, what was the second part of the question? I'm sorry, I was rambling. So private.
Can I build one on my property
Yes.
if I
Okay.
don't have a natural? And will they come if I build it?
Yes, I have one on the side of my house. I have a regular pond with some fish and turtles and frogs, and then I just dug this ugly little hole on the side of the house, and it's basically a vernal pool. It doesn't dry out completely, but there's certainly no fish in there, and it fills up more with the spring rain. It's on the side of my house. It's really tends to be wetter, and the water runs into it, and absolutely they'll find it. If you have these animals in your area already, if you're in an area where spotted salamanders range, where wood frogs range, peepers and wood frogs are everywhere, they'll absolutely find it. Yes. What came to mind first was peepers and gray tree frogs, because there's a lot of gray tree frogs in my area, and they love it. They breed in the pond every year. The pond was only dug probably a year or two before the amphibians start to find it.
Along that same line of thought, Marla was interested in what size do you have to be for it to be considered a vernal pool?
Well, I don't. It's not so much the size; it's just whether or not it's a temporary body. There is actually a vernal pool I know of that's a tire rut. It's ruts in a dirt road that goes through a forest, and it's pretty much always full of water in some way because there's a spring right next to it. And the salamanders breed in this tire rut year after year, and it's about 6 feet long and about 2 feet wide, and there's salamander eggs in it every year. It doesn't have to be big. They'll breed in it. It just has to have enough water for long enough for those larvae to morph out into adulthood in 4 to 8 weeks after they hatch. It's pretty amazing. They're not picky. And toads in particular, you can put I'm convinced you can put a big enough cereal bowl out there with rainwater and toads will breed in it if they find it. But
we have a question. Liz was saying, do you have any recommendations for what to do when you spot frogs and toads attempting to enact Frogger in the road?
Oh, yeah. That's tough this time of year because sometimes it could be so many of them. If you can safely stop and move them in the direction they're going, that's totally acceptable. It's just hard to avoid them sometimes because there's just so many on the road. But please, if you're going to do that, get your flashers on, make sure you can safely stop and kind of scooch them along to the opposite. Always move them in the direction they're going, because otherwise they're just going to turn around and do it again. Same rule with turtles crossing the road. If you can safely stop and get out of onto the shoulder, move them in the direction they're going. Most of them do these migrations year after year, and as long as it's not that heavily traveled road, the majority of them are going to be okay. But those that don't, this time of year you do have a lot of raccoons and things cruising the roadsides because they're picking up carcasses of frogs and salamanders that are squashed by the cars. So nature always cleans up a little bit.
Tom, you mentioned that you go out at night to find these critters. Can you find them during the day, or is nighttime the best time?
Well, nighttime is the best time. Wood frogs will be active during the day. The photo I showed was taken during midday. They'll be out. I think Russ saw some today during daylight hours. But they really start cranking up at night, and particularly on wet nights. Salamanders you will not see during the day. They'll go under the leaf litter at the bottom of the pond, wait for the sun to go down, and then they'll reemerge into the water column and resume their breeding. But you can see egg masses certainly during the day. You can see tadpoles during the day. Some of the vernal pools that don't dry up completely will have green frog tadpoles from the year before in the ponds, because green frogs and bullfrogs will use temporary bodies of water, but their larvae usually take a year or two to metamorphose. And as long as there's just a little bit of water left in that pond, they'll survive the next year and do their thing. Which is an issue, again, talking the ponds that are on the side of the Gunpowder River, when there's a flooding event, sometimes that puts fish into those ponds. And that's an issue for that particular year, because now there's predators in that water that can eat the larvae. If the pond dries up, it's not an issue because the fish obviously can't survive it. But these guys have been doing their thing for millions of years. So as long as we protect the habitat itself, they're going to be fine.
Any other questions for Tom about vernal pools, spring frogs, anything?
So who has show and tell tonight? I know we might have some folks online that have critters they want to share with us. We'll try to keep it brief for each member so everybody can get a chance, or even if you don't have a critter to show, maybe you want to just say hi and tell us about what your favorite herp is or what you're into, feel free. Russ, you want to kick us off? You got your king snake there?
Yeah, and we have Elias. Why do I have such a problem with that name? And Calvin as well. I'll get it.
This is my king snake male name. I call him Kong. He's named after King Kong because he eats everything. He is absolutely a monster. He's only a year old, and he's like almost 33 inches long now. He was like 12 when I got him a year ago. So he's getting big. I'm gonna breed him when he's gonna be the male. I have 2 females, but the females aren't ready yet, but he's gonna be the sire when, hopefully, and then probably another year. So yeah, it's actually the same species as the king snakes we have here in Maryland, but the Florida ones are more brightly colored. The ones here are more dark and more black with the gold chain pattern on them. But these guys, when they get mature, he's still not fully mature. When he gets fully mature, he'll be almost all black and yellow. It's like one scale black with the little yellow dot in it, and they're just gorgeous. I just love them. So, and he's really chill. He's crawling around, but he's very tame. I would let a little kid hold him. He's very tame.
So there's the bigger version.
Yeah.
It's like King Snake Brady Bunch in the gallery view here.
All right, Elias, you have something to share.
Can you hear me? Oh, no, I can't hear you.
Yep, we can hear you, Elias.
Okay, so these are tiger rat snakes. They're Spilotes pilatus. They're South American colubrids. They stretch from Mexico down almost, I guess, to the center of South America. And yeah, this is my pair of them. Yeah, any questions or anything?
How big is that cage? That cage is amazing, Elias. But what are the dimensions for it?
It's 6 by 3 by 4.
Absolutely terrific. Gorgeous, gorgeous plants. Good job.
Calvin has a American toad to share.
Hi everyone, this is my American toad. Here we go. Sorry. So this is Phoebe. It's short for amphibian. And he's an American toad. And he has a pretty loud release call, as you can hear. So for most of you probably know, he's letting me know that he's a male and he's not going to be able to mate with me and deliver eggs for me. So that's his release call. And we have heard him somewhat recently doing a mating call. Oops, there he goes on my laptop. I was wondering if he was, if he heard the toads tonight, if he was gonna, he's usually really chill. Okay, I'm gonna put Phoebe back. Thanks. Oh, gosh.
See, that's terrific. I never get tired of toads. Toads are wonderful. They have great personalities, and like, I don't know, people want exotic stuff, but I always encourage just have a pet toad. They're wonderful. Neat little critters. Thanks for sharing him.
Does anybody else have anything to share this evening? One of their friends?
Yeah, sorry to be on camera.
I guess not.
Good. I have a.
Oh wait, Kathy says, I don't have mic or camera. I find what I think is snake poop in my garage, often on a roll-up outdoor carpet. I've seen garter snakes and black snakes around, and I find a lot of snake skins in the garage. I didn't think they ate that often. Does the amount of poop mean I have a lot of them living in the garage?
Well, rat snakes will sometimes overwinter or den up in garages depending on the temperature. My king snake is totally like up the back of my shirt and lost at this point. So I'm just giving up. I'm just letting him do his thing. I'm giving up. So yeah, so snake poop basically looks a lot like bird poop. There's a brown or black portion and then a white chalky yellow portion because they excrete solid uric acid. So if that's what you're seeing, it's yeah, definitely poop as well as they also usually poop when they shed anyway. So if you're seeing shed skins, that's probably what it is. Folks like us will probably be happy if we had snakes in the garage. Most of us have snakes in the garage by choice, but they'll keep your rodent population in check. And luckily snakes, unlike rodents and things like that, they don't do any structural damage. They don't chew wires. They don't harm anything. They're just kind of there. And occasionally startle people. That's the worst of it. But yes, not unusual at all for rat snakes to get into garages. They'll tend to be off the ground though, up in rafters, things like that. Garter snakes will tend to be at ground level on the ground underneath bags or something like that because garter snakes don't tend to climb too much.
Robin has her hand up.
I went out before this all happened. I went out to the pond near my house, which is right near Loch Raven. And it's a little pond that I think is stream fed. And last year I had heard wood frogs there late in the day. And so I've been monitoring it to see if I could hear them again. And I went last week and heard nothing, and there was still ice on the pond. And today I went down there and there were a bunch of spring peepers, and I heard just one very tentative wood frog.
Oh, yeah, okay. It's great getting the reports this time of year from all over the state, from what people are seeing and hearing. It's very cool. And hopefully people keep sharing that on our Facebook page. Those that are members, you have access to our members only Facebook page. It's very elite. And we can share our reports there. So if you're not a member, certainly please consider joining up.
Hey, Tom, when you go out, if you're going out and exploring and herping at night, do you have any tips or tricks or also cautions if we're trying to be respectful of the animals in the habitat as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, make sure you have permission to be where you are. Those of us who have been doing this a while have frequently been challenged by either police or property owners or somebody like that. Because it's sometimes seen as aberrant behavior to walk around the woods on a rainy night with a flashlight. So make sure you have permission to be where you are. and any of the state parks, you do need permission for that. Other than that, it's important to, again, recognize how these animals breed, and they rely on that water quality. You don't want to trample through too many wetland areas, because you're going to stir up silt, which will cover up those spermatophores that the salamanders drop. The mud and silt will cover up egg masses. So we would just want to have as little effect on the habitat as possible. I mean, that being said, the animals we love, sometimes you have to search for and move some things to find them, to photograph them or observe them even. But that can be done in a gentle fashion. If you're going to handle any amphibians, it's best to avoid handling them if you can. But if you're going to handle them, your hands, you didn't see it off camera, but I got this little bowl of moist towels before I picked up the salamander. I wet my hands down, because I always have really dry skin anyway. Your hands should be wet, preferably covered with some mud from the ponds. If you're the type of person that always is using lots of lotions and things on your hands, it's probably better to just use like a nitrile glove or something to pick up the animals, because their skin is how they breathe, their skin is how they absorb water. So they do have permeable skins that can be easily damaged. So you just want to handle them gently with wet hands, or a wet net into a bucket for observation, and then put back into the habitat as soon as possible. Obviously, we don't want to remove animals from the habitat, and just be mindful of there may be other folks coming behind you, so that you want to leave the habitat in a manner that you'd want to find it in. I think a lot of us have been in the field and come up in a lot of the parks that are frequented by a lot of people, and find logs and rocks turned over, and obviously somebody was looking for stuff and did not do so in a responsible manner. So just be mindful of that.
Tom, you want to talk about sanitizing boots
Oh, and
between
also, if
sites?
you are going from
Yeah.
habitat to habitat, disinfect boots, disinfect your nets.
Tom,
Russ is reading my mind tonight.
yeah, Tom.
Definitely. So
We
next
lost.
month we'll hear in detail. There are several funguses that are affecting. Yeah.
It looks like
Can you hear me?
you're,
I stopped my video, so hopefully you can hear me. Can you hear me?
yeah, we can hear you a little bit better now that we can't see your face.
That's usually the best. That's usually the best way to deal with me anyway. Yeah. So I'm gonna. My Wi-Fi kicked off. Okay. So we do disinfect our equipment during our hikes. If you're out at vernal pools or herping anywhere around nowadays, there's several pathogens that are affecting amphibians. There's a fungus that's affecting snakes. So if you're going from habitat to habitat, things like boots, nets, snake hooks, tongs, if that's something you're using, if you're looking for snakes, should all be disinfected properly after leaving the habitat. You don't want to go from one wetland to another in the same day without disinfecting your boots, because you risk spreading one of those pathogens from one habitat to another. Most of the pathogens that we see in Maryland are pretty widespread all over the state. However, we want to follow best practices, and we don't want to take chances with that. And there's fairly simple procedures for disinfecting your boots or equipment that you can find online. We use chlorhexaderm because it's fairly stable in a bottle in a truck, and it doesn't negatively affect the environment at all. Bleach can be used, but be careful with bleach, because not only will it damage the material of your boots, but it's toxic to wildlife. where some of the other disinfectants are not. So if you're going to use something like bleach, use it away from the actual habitat, preferably at your vehicle or in your driveway at home. And a lot of times, again, look this up online as far as times, but simple dehydration, as far as just drying out the equipment for a period of time in sunlight, will go along in nullifying a lot of these pathogens that may be in the environment and negatively affect our amphibian friends.
Tom, Liz was interested in, is it easy or difficult to differentiate between egg masses, maybe even between salamander versus frog egg masses?
Spotted salamander egg masses tend to be usually no bigger than a tennis ball. They're very dense jelly. They hold their shape if they're removed from the water. Spotted salamander egg masses can be cloudy, milky colored, or they can be clear. There's really it just depends on the makeup of the water they're in. And the spotted salamander eggs a lot of times will be green with that algae that grows in them. Frog eggs tend to have your round jellied eggs in a larger jelly envelope. And it just depends on the species. Wood frogs, the large floating mats. So if you see large floating mats of eggs, they're usually wood frogs. Toads, like I showed in the picture, are strings. There's no other animal that does that. So if you see strings of jelly, it's toad eggs. Newly laid eggs are much smaller and clearer. The longer they're in the pond, they swell up. The jelly swells with water and they get bigger and bigger. So a very swollen jelly envelope around the eggs indicates that they've been in the water a longer time. Newly laid eggs, especially the toads, are really thin threads when they come out, and then they just swell up with the water. Keying out one frog egg mass from another can be difficult. Bullfrog egg masses do the same thing. They float them on the top of the surface, but they're much later in the year. So your best way to key them out is when you see them and knowing what species breed when. The green frogs, bullfrogs are laying them later in the spring, early summer. Wood frogs, leopard frogs are breeding earlier.
That might be a good talk to have, to see all the different pictures of the egg masses.
Also, Bronwyn, we did a training already for Frog Watch, but that's still an option for folks for next year. It's organized on American Association of Zookeepers has Operation Frog Watch, and they train volunteers to learn to recognize all of the frog calls that are native to your area. You choose a site of your choosing, and you sit out there and you just record, not audio, but you can write down what species you're hearing in a particular place over a particular period of time. And then that data is entered into the Frog Watch website, and they could actually monitor populations nationwide of different frog populations. So our Maryland chapter is run by a curator at the National Aquarium who does the training, and it's a wonderful training. You get to memorize all these frog calls. So if you're interested in that, we can probably email you the link and hook you up with that as well.
And Glenn had a question for you. He wants to know, how many reptiles do you have? You might want to say how many reptiles and amphibians do you have? Oh, looks like you have a feline too.
It's insane here tonight. There's animals everywhere. Was that just for me? How many animals I have? You don't want to know.
I think so. I don't know. Glenn, if you want to know how many
I responded.
I have enough to keep me busy. It's a full-time job some days. Okay, so Russ has eight snakes and 3 cats. There you go. I think I have about 10 species, individuals, I don't have a current count. I'm currently fostering some reptiles from a seizure as well. So there's that, which is a headache.
Is it possible for the bullfrogs to be out now?
It's possible. They're not breeding, but they'll wake up and start to move around. Something you might, a lot of times the bullfrogs will be there to eat other amphibians. Something we see quite often in the vernal pools are snapping turtles. They'll migrate into the vernal pools as well because it's just a feast. They can just feast on frogs and salamanders. So it's not unusual at all to find some big snapping turtles hanging out in vernal pools. But you got to be mindful of if you're kind of reaching your hands around in the muck trying to find something. You might come up with a big old dinosaur turtle as well.
And Marlo was interested, do you know anyone leading herping in Wyman Park?
Herping is a term. Yes, it is. In Wyman Park, I don't know him offhand, but I think that's a great thing for us to organize. If you want to take the bull by the horns, we can organize that. One of the things we like to do is bio blitzes and kind of get counts of various reptiles and amphibians in various places. And urban areas are terrific places to do that because people don't normally think of wildlife being in some of the urban and suburban areas. And you'd be surprised what you come up with. Gene, did you have something?
Yeah, I've lived near Wyman Park for quite a while. The big thing this time of year will be American toads calling. And occasionally they are abundant. Occasionally I have found redback salamanders. Never have, I don't think I've ever heard a peeper. I'm trying to think of, and some time ago, wood frogs, but there's not a lot of habitat that's just occasionally flooded. There used to be a floodplain at the foot of Tudor Arms, north of 37th, which was converted to a big athletic field. And the cattails, there was a thin band of cattails and red-winged blackbirds, and that's all gone since Hopkins converted it into essentially a football field. So Wyman Park doesn't have much. In my area, it's really a rocky gorge, and that's its topography. So it doesn't have the wonderful gentle gradients and occasionally flooded places that the vernal pools that you're talking about have. So Wyman Park is a better place for birders. So a variety of birders, including some hawks, some owls living there, and the occasional fox. Oh, and when you can find them, black snakes, black rat snakes come out occasionally, get out into the street and get rescued. But that's really only early summer that I've seen them.
Thanks, Gene.
Sure.
And as for everybody, in terms of the field trips, if you have any ideas, and we're also, if you want to be involved in organizing the field trips for the clubs, just send myself or Tom an email and we can work with you on that. We're always looking for different places to go. I think we have some places maybe on the Eastern Shore to go to for some field trips to make some variety of herping opportunities. We've just been kind of in a holding pattern because of this kind of global pandemic going on. So we've been, but we do want to get back into the swing of things. So if field trips are something that are of interest to you for the club, and you want to be involved in that aspect of it, let us know. Tom, you want to put your email in the chat box? I'll put mine in.
Yes, and I know, although I didn't answer the email yet, I did see it. If you're on the call here, we're going to try to organize a canoe/kayak trip to observe turtles at Robert E. Lee this spring
At
and summer.
Roland Park.
So yes, indeed. You can tell how long I've been around. I'm trying to type and talk at the same time, and this time of night does not work well. And also, yeah, we're obviously located here in the Baltimore metro area, but we'd love the club to be statewide. So if you're somewhere else in the state, you're familiar with your backyard, we're not. So if you want to suggest a field trip and you're willing to help lead it because it's your area and you know where there's some good spots, absolutely send us an email and we'll organize something. I'm certainly not afraid of having a bit to get to a good herping spot. I just thought we want the input. We want the club to involve everybody. So I'm all about sharing the workload. So let us know what you want to do.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming out. We have next month on May 12th for the next meeting we're going to learn all about Kitrid from Dr. Lips. And then we're going to learn about herping in Texas from Russ right up here. If you have anything that you want to learn or you want to teach us all about, let us know. Again, this is our club. We make it what we want. Big thing coming up is the World Turtle Day, and that is May 23rd. We really need some folks to help. I got a lot of names. Thank you so much for agreeing to be a volunteer. If you want to volunteer for World Turtle Day, let us know. We'll be getting the registration out so you can get your time slot to come and play with turtles and feed a giant tortoise. Everybody stay well, stay healthy. We hope you see you online. If not at the next Herp Club meeting, some of the other great programs that are coming your way via the Natural History Society of Maryland. Tom, any last words?
You know, if y'all can make that talk next month, chytrid fungus is a tremendous threat. We've already lost species to it. So it's worthwhile getting the latest up-to-date information because we're learning every day about it. And it's a little daunting to hear about it. The more we know, the more we can probably do to prevent things. So please tune in next month. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Tom.
All right, we'll talk soon. Bye now. Can you guys